Racism is on the rise. You hear it said all the time online by people, particularly on the progressive pro-immigration side, and they're right. I'm not going to lie about that. It is. I've seen the sudden increase of it on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it. I'm beginning to even see it notice it in real life. Be under no illusions, it is happening. However, it is a reaction against a political system that has clearly failed. It has failed because for 20 odd years the British public have demanded lower migration and the political class have abjectly refused to deliver it. The Boris wave is just the icing on the cake, and it's the most visible sudden ethnic change, and it is the one that has made people suddenly more and more aware of it. That doesn't make me happy, it makes me incredibly depressed, but we need to call out both those who are being racist, but also the causes of it, rather than trying to live in denial over the situation. It's very understandable to see, to understand. It's very easy to understand when you take a moment. My wife and I, Marie and I, are both political liberals. We have both, for the last 20 years or so since we met, lived in and around London. We're incredibly comfortable in multi-ethnic, multiracial communities. We lived for most of our time in London in either Walthamstow and Croydon. Both of them are very, very multi-ethnic. However, if it's got to the stage where the immigration people and the multiculturalism people have lost us, then I shudder to think what's happening to the rest of the people in the country, both here and across the West more generally. It's not like Marie and I have ever had a history of being extreme. I would argue that basically for different reasons, both her and I have progressively moved over into a more and more hard position on migration and integration after watching the events of the last 10 to 15 years. It's no longer good enough for the clever people to simply deny and accuse us all of being fascist, racist, or whatever the epithet they're going to use at this precise moment. We have a problem. And the problem is the political system. The political system is basically stuck because it is full of people both in and around Parliament with people who are immigrationists. They believe in immigration, they believe in multiculturalism, and they are not willing to listen to the what has now been a 20-year-long drumbeat call for lower migration. And the longer this goes on, the more desperate people are becoming, because the more they see the level of change in their country, and the sheer numbers are starting to scare them. This is why, to a certain extent, why the political class love focusing on illegal migration. They hate it because it's very visible and it makes people very angry, but it's very convenient because it means they can avoid talking about everything else with legal migration. Like they still like talking about net migration. Well, net migration came down to 200,000 or whatever the number is. Well, yeah, but if you had 800,000 people leave the country, then in actual fact, gross migration into the country was 1 million people. What kind of society are you going to have if you're going to be exchanging 1 million people a year in your country? How long do you think the welfare system's going to last? How long do you think intercommunity relations are going to last? How long do you think that this democratic experiment, which is what the West has been under for the last 200 and something years, is going to last? These are all questions that the clever people in charge should be asking themselves, particularly when they sit there in leak after leak going, yes, we're really worried about what's happening in the country and, it's a tinderbox and everything else, whilst doing absolutely nothing to actually respond to people's demands. Now, Labour will tell you it's really complicated. It is really complicated, but it's also really simple. Government could force net migration to near zero if they wanted tomorrow. Put aside the illegals coming across, you could deal with that very quickly. But I'm talking about actual gross net migration, legal migration into this country. You could stop that almost instantly. They choose not to. They choose not to. So when they say we're aware of the problem and we're worried about it as well, and it's like a tinderbox, they appear to be quite happily busy, quite happy stacking the tinder at the same time. You can't claim to be listening to people on net migration, migration, whilst having migration into the country at over 1 million people a year. Sorry, you just can't. You just can't. Is it complicated? Of course it's more complicated than that. There will be implications for universities. There will be implications for GDP and everything else. Fine. Then those are the implications you've got to deal with. Because if not, there's not going to be a functioning democracy at the end of this. I'm not talking about now. I'm not talking about the next 3 years. But you will get to that stage where people just go, well, this democratic system has clearly failed because I keep asking for the same fucking thing and they never, ever deliver it. And this is the same problem you see it in France. You see it across the West now. A political class and establishment that simply does not want to do what the population wants it to do. Now, what you'll always hear is, oh, well, they're all doctors and nurses and we need doctors and nurses. Okay, well, you go pick the doctors and nurses out. You know, by the way, we haven't got enough positions for half the doctors and nurses in the country. And why are we stealing a third world ones? But hey, that's by the by. That is the reality of it. And this is why yesterday I wrote a couple of tweets on Twitter and I said, I think that Europe's about to undergo a phase change. Politically, economically and socially. A phase change is like what happens with when water turns into ice. It's a sudden shift from one system to another. You see them quite regularly in nature and stuff like that. I think you're about to see that within our politics across Europe particularly, but especially the West. I think you're looking down the gun of a realignment at a speed that you've not seen probably ever. Because I think that one country will fall to the new forces that are demanding a more muscular state that's willing to enforce borders and get rid of those that the citizens don't want. And I think once that happens once, it will happen again and again, and it will likely sweep away most of the institutions from the post Second World War, because they are liberal by nature, and this will be a new illiberal order, I suppose. I don't say that with any happiness in my heart, but it will be illiberal insofar as it will be willing to do the things that the liberal chattering classes are not now. I only hope it happens soon, not just for our people's sanity, because it is grim at the moment. Our politics are grim. Society is grim. This country looks grim. You know, economically it's grim. But actually also because the longer this goes on, the bigger and worse the reaction has to be to get back to some level of normality and semblance of sanity within our country. If you've got million people in the country illegally now, just pick a number and you leave it so there's another 2 in there, get a million extra, then you've got to get rid of 3. The problem has become 3 times bigger, and therefore the size of the change required is going to be, by definition, a power larger. And I don't think that you're going to see that change in the very near future. The Mahmood changes won't do anything. To be honest, it may even accelerate migration, but I don't think it will. I thought it was interesting that Trump came out and talked about the fact that he was stopping third world immigration into the US over some events over there, and I think that's the direction travel now. And I suspect that you're living in probably the dying days of the welfare state as it was designed after the Second World War. I think the immigrationists, the liberals, the left, effectively the modern left, have pushed things so far that it simply cannot hold. Why would anyone keep paying into this system when the money's just being spent on people who, shouldn't really even be here probably, or most people don't even want here? Why would I keep paying into a system when the money is basically going to be spent on people who've got 6 kids or something? That's a choice they're making. Where, these are the questions that are now starting to be talked about quietly across this country as basically the majority. And when I say the majority, the sane, normal majority who are integrated and are either directly British by descent and if you like, ethnicity, those who've come here multiple generations ago and are integrated and part of our society and are as British as you and I, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of culturally. And even the people who, like my wife, who, moved here 20 years ago from France, who is, got a British passport now, though she would never classify herself as British in that sense, in the sense of an identity, but she is British in the sense that she loves this country, wants it to be successful, speaks the language, loves the culture and everything else. The majority. It's no longer good enough. So, I don't know. I'm not doing this video particularly for anything beyond just to warn people, I suppose. I think bad things are going to happen. I really do. And I think those bad things are necessary things. I watched a podcast with Suella Braverman on yesterday evening when Marie was in the bath, and she talked, I think she said something, what was it? Something along the lines of, we have to stop being nice. Nice is what brought us here. And that rung a bell with me. It's not nice it's not nice to the majority to import a minority that no one wants here. It's not nice to the majority to change their communities against their will. It's not nice on the majority to force them to pay for minorities who come here that no one asked for. This is what the British political class and Western political class have done for decades now. They've been nice to those coming here, but they've become progressively more and more unnice to the very people who elected them and whose country or countries they represent. I think it will be interesting to see how things pan out over the next couple of years. I think is a reasonable chance the Rassemblement National wins in France. And I think that you could see that wave spreading out across this continent. I think if you're a liberal leader, politician, lover of the system, you're about to just get your life shat on from a great height by a great lot of people, because people really, really are now tired of it. And I do say that in country after country, because I do speak to friends in different countries. Yes, the circumstances are different, but the outcomes are very similar. And really, actually, the building political forces are identical. It was very interesting. After Brexit, I was told that Brexit would never happen anywhere else. And I kept warning people, it's like all of the same forces in Britain that caused Brexit are the same across most of Europe and much of the West. They didn't believe me. They're not saying that anymore. Ironically enough, give it 10 years, there may be a European Union that people like myself who fought to leave might look at and go, fair enough. There definitely won't be a European Union in 10 to 15 years that the Liberals will love and adore, because that's just not the way that politics are going now. I want things to change, and I want us to, the political system to change and morph and get on with providing what the public wants. But I also am very scared of what's likely to happen. Human beings very rarely react in the short term in a rational way. We tend to overreact, and I think that this could be that moment where there could be a very, very unpleasant overreaction, such as the level of anger, distrust, and just general sense of kind of being cheated for too long on this subject by people who've denied the problems, denied that anyone who was in any way concerned about migration or the changes in our societies had a valid point. I suspect that once those forces come unpopped properly from the bottle, it won't be particularly pleasant. It may be a necessary reaction, but I don't think it'll be very pleasant. And as someone who grew up in a household that was social democratic by Ben, who was always brought up to treat people not by the colour of the skin, but by who they were as individuals, who has friends who are of different races and ethnic groupings and nationalities and stuff. I really worry. I really worry for them. And I think if I was a ethnic minority in any of these countries across the West, who'd been there for a long time, who was integrated, who loved the countries, I think I would be absolutely terrified of if something doesn't get done soon. I think many of them are, if you look at the polling. I think a lot of them now are starting to wake up very, very fast to not just the speed of the ethnic change. Don't forget, a lot of these people left their countries for a very good reason. They thought they were a bit shite, so they wanted to come somewhere better. Why do you want to import the rest of that culture afterwards? But actually also on top of that, I think many of them are smart enough to realise the direction of travel in political terms, the way the wind is blowing. And they're worried. And I am too. Anyway, not very pleasant video, but there we go.